Hi, this is my final AIP project. Using blogging to build reading engagement and motivation in a high school social studies class. James Anthofer. I'm doing this project for Morningside's instructional technology class. So, big thing about my classroom environment, we're part of a charter school network. It's called Denver School of Science and Technology. We serve over 80% free and reduced lunch students, and over 90% of those students are students of color. All of the students have laptops through DSST. We use technology in every class and every day since sixth grade. There's a few exceptions to that, but that's mostly true. And I personally teach 11th and 12th graders in U.S. history, AP U.S. history, and civics. So when I was thinking of what I wanted to do for my project, what I decided on was reading and digital literacy. And the big reason for that is that's the biggest issue that we see at our school in terms of low-income students, students of color, is just being behind in terms of grade level in reading. And we need to figure out ways to use all this technology that we have to bring them and close that achievement gap. So the big couple things that kind of animated my problem statement are all about a couple things. First, how digital literacy can increase reading engagement. This comes from a study by Hines and Kursilov using more e-learning, more tablets in an alternative school, and about how that was able to empower students to become stronger readers. Another important thing for me is about how digital literacy or using digital technology can actually decrease literacy. And in particular, that's with male students, especially male students who play a lot of video games. There's like a big danger of distractibility, and that comes from Duncan. And then finally, this sort of idea about technology and about how it can build this idea of self-efficacy in digital reading, especially for female students who very often interact with digital devices less and are more likely to be stronger print readers. But then when they use digital technology to take assessments, they feel a little bit less confident. So you have the two sides here, which is like you need the engagement of digital literacy, but you also need the motivation that strong print readers have. And that a lot of this comes from the ideas of Unruh and Quirk, which is that reading is all about the combination of motivation and engagement. And so motivation is this big idea of stamina and feeling confident. And engagement is the thing about feeling excited and connected with reading. And so you want to build something that can bridge these two things for both male and female students, for strong print readers, weak print readers, strong digital readers, weak digital readers, to bring all this stuff together. So I had a few different plans, and some of these come out of more of the research. The first plan was to use independent silent reading to build reading engagement and comprehension. And this comes from Cuervis et al., which is a program using digital independent silent reading to kind of build choices in reading. And so the idea would be to use this in a social studies class, build reading stamina using independent silent reading on a digital platform. And so you could see a way that this could build some reading skills, stamina, maybe possibly motivation. It's not super engaging though. It feels very similar to what we do in class already. And you're not getting this metacognitive skills. You're not getting more of these skills about how do I learn better as a digital reader? Am I better at digital reading versus print reading? What do I know? What don't I know? So this wasn't a plan that I'm going to end up using. Another plan was to do blogging. And so to do blog writing and reflection instead of doing an essay, and do this blogging as a way to build engagement and motivation. And I got this idea using Hansen. He was a political science professor who used this in his classes, and what he saw was students actually, when surveyed, said that they took just as much time blogging as they did in a traditional essay format, and they felt much more engaged. And so my idea would be to do a similar thing as part of a longer unit in social studies. And the good thing about that is you kind of build some of these themes and questions in history, but you go deeper rather than wider. And you're going to build this stamina. You're going to build this metacognitive skills, like what do I know about blogging? How am I becoming a stronger blogger, a digital reader? But also it's transferring over print reading skills that we're practicing in class. And you kind of get a choice of a large array of partners, all the students in your class, rather than just like a partner like in person. And so when I was planning this, I couldn't think of any big weaknesses. And this was the plan that I ended up choosing. And we're going to see that in the implementation in a second. The final plan that I thought about doing was to do a collaborative tutoring protocol that would be used digitally. And this would be with homework. Basically, students would be helping each other out with homework with assigned sort of mentees. This comes from Park and Kim, who used this virtual tutoring thing, where actually students were tutoring essentially an avatar or a robot in their classes. And so the cool thing about this would it use technology collaboratively. We'd build these skills. It'd be very different from what we typically do. But I was a little bit worried that it's not going to actually build a ton of motivation. And since I would be pairing real life students to each other and not an avatar or a robot, if the reading level of students is really different, that's going to cause some serious problems in terms of how I would pair students up. And also, sometimes we do have some attendance issues with some of our students, and that could cause huge problems because certain partners wouldn't be there at certain times. So I didn't end up using this plan. So as part of the blogging plan, what we would do is it's part of an overall unit of study. And so essentially what happens is you first, you do a pre-survey, and this is so I can kind of measure engagement and measure motivation, reading engagement and motivation. Then they would actually read that Hansen study about blogging and about how students did just as much work in blogging as they did in doing a normal essay. And we'd practice doing the blogging, and then we'd do a little bit more of the survey where they'd make a prediction. And then we'd start some content for the unit in that next day. And I would set some norms on how blogging works. Then the next day, we would make some predictions. And then on that fourth day, we'd do our first big blogging day where they would be commenting. Then there would be some more blogging and commenting on the fifth day. And then that sixth day, based on the way this calendar broke down, this was going to be parent-teacher conferences. On that seventh day, they're going to be using actually some online simulations and tying it back to that big unit question with blogging. Eighth day, doing a lot more blogging, doing a lot more commenting. Ninth day, posting, commenting, and then making some predictions as part of their blogging. 10th day, it's going to be a little cut off here at the bottom, but more predictions, more commenting. And then finally, we're going to get to start of the big meat of the project, which is at the very end. Where there's going to be some predictions about the questions on the unit final. So some of the multiple choice, some of the short answer stuff. And then on the 12th day, we're going to do this multiple choice unit final. And then we're going to start our big final reflection. And students will be assigned based on grade level, reading grade levels, because I want to avoid that problem of students feeling frustrated with each other. Like, I can't respond to him because he didn't write anything. I don't want to respond to her because she wrote too much or he wrote too much. So it would be based on homogeneous groupings. Day 13, we're going to be responding to a lot of data, making predictions, seeing if our predictions came true. And writing a lot of reflections. And then we're going to actually be discussing in person, like, how did this whole class go? That's the whole, like, building student voice idea here. And then finally, we're going to be doing a post-survey where I'm going to be measuring reading engagement and measuring reading motivation. So that was the plan. Of course, we didn't end up using that plan. And so instead, we looked at a couple of case studies here. The first case study was about using iPads and mobile devices. This is an extremely similar context to my own. And they were able to use this one-to-one technology, and they found some distractibility issues, which is kind of what I keep pointing out with this engagement versus motivation issue. Students were engaged but not motivated. And through this study, I wasn't convinced that I'd rather use iPads than the one-to-one laptops we already have. Another case study here is Grant and Barber. And this is like full-on virtual learning. And most of this was seen as fairly ineffective by the authors. And they mentioned there's some big drawbacks here. Students aren't used to doing mobile learning, aren't used to doing digital learning. And they mentioned that there's some promise of the virtual learning. But as I noted in my write-up about this, there's a big drop in terms of attendance, engagement, and a lot of those things when you're in full-on e-learning, full-on virtual learning. And they kind of pointed that out, but didn't quite fully point that out. So that kind of leads to these big findings. I didn't end up implementing this project because we were out of school. But if I had implemented it, when I look back at the case studies, I do think there's a lot of advantages of my project over the case studies. It's fully infused into the class structure. Both case studies, it was sort of like an add-on, and students weren't used to it. Well, students in mine, using my implementation plan, it's fully infused into every part of the unit. They're going to get these in-person reminders. This stuff isn't just going to be digital. A lot of stuff that happened with the case studies was these kind of like digital reminders to do stuff. Or in the case of the AP US History or the AP European History students, they were doing work on their own in that case study. So this would be preferable to that. But one thing that I did find out, since we didn't have school for me to implement, I actually used some data from our first e-learning platform to get into some of the stuff that I might find in my project. And I think what's really important to see here, and I have some data here, is that I think even in the best case scenario of implementing my project, we are going to run into some issues with ELL students. ELL students really prefer in-person learning. This is backed up by Protasio and some of the studies she did there. And the stuff that has the biggest impact on ELL students, so there was a study that used a new social studies curriculum aimed towards ELL students, didn't use digital platforms. It was a lot about using digital platforms to present information, but a ton of the work that students did was in print. And so I would need more of an implementation period. We need to do more e-learning at my school, which is the phase we're in right now as part of the coronavirus to know. But I am pretty worried about how my ELL students would have done with the blogging project based on what they're doing so far in our e-learning at my school using one-to-one. So this gets to my big reflections here. I continue to see technology as being super valuable as a way to track data, build engagement. I continue to see blogging as something that I could definitely think about using in the future to build both reading engagement and motivation. But at least based on this very early data from e-learning, I think really, really careful planning with technology, not just like dropping it in there, is going to be important for all students, but it's going to be especially important for ELL students and students with disabilities. And it should not just be total e-learning, total virtual learning. We're going to need to build solid interpersonal relationships in class, especially for ELL students, in order for them to do this blogging outside of class. And it's going to be a big lift for them, but it could be very valuable for them to feel more connected. All right, thank you so much.